Right, today we've gone to chapter 8 of Sutta Discovery 43 rather, right? So the SD number SD 43.8, which is the Potaliya Sutta, or more fully, Gaha Potaliya Sutta. Because apparently there's more than one Potaliya Sutta, so we put a prefix Gahapati, meaning houselord, in front of his name. Potaliya is the name of this Brahmin, and this discourse is suttas about him. Now the next thing you notice, I'm looking at the top right hand corner of page 117. That's where the details of the sutta are. And it's very important to know either the name of the sutta or the number of the sutta. As you know, in Singapore, we all have names and we all have an ID number. Very often we know a sutta, but we are unable to locate it. So it's very important to know the sutta name. And sometimes the sutta names are repeated. Many suttas have the same name. So in our translation series, we make an effort to disambiguate. In other words, to make every sutta unique, have its own name. So this prefixing is one system. And another way is you can remember by the sutta number, the reference number. That's the next line. You can see the bold print M54. So this M is Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses of the Buddha, sutta number 54. And then you also have the English translation of the sutta, the discourse to Potaliya, the houselord. The word houselord, Gahapati, here in the Buddha's time refers to someone, a rich man who has his own house, at least his own house. He may have other assets, other property too. So this is a kind of a new class which is on the uprise during the Buddha's time. Then next line you have the theme. That gives you an idea if someone asks you what's the sutta about. So this is the line. It tells you that this sutta is about the true meaning of renunciation. So we're going to find out what's it about. Okay? In fact, Potaliya is very interesting, one of the very colorful characters in Buddhist literature. He is a very rich man, and what he has done is he claims to have given up his riches to his children. And he dresses himself up, or rather he still dresses himself like a layperson, but he fancies himself to be a renunciant. He says, well, I'm not going to use any money now, except for food and clothing. So he thinks that because he does that, he's a renunciant. And he expects people to address him so. So he comes to see the Buddha, and the Buddha, seeing him dressed as a layman, as a houselord, calls him a houselord, and he gets very upset because of the way the Buddha addresses him. And then the Buddha explains to him why he's still a houselord, and then he's very curious. He says, wow, that's interesting, I want you to tell me who the true renunciant is. And then the teaching begins. So that's a bit of a introduction. Let's look at the sutta. There are lots of introductory materials here which you can read on your own or when the occasion arises. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at the sutta in terms of practice, something we can learn for our own happiness and maybe even awakening. Because as you know, the suttas are not just about learning some ancient teachings, it's about freeing ourselves from suffering, it's about awakening to true reality. These teachings were given by the Buddha 2,500 years ago, and these teachings are still with us, still valid. And these are among some of the most ancient records we have of the Buddha's teaching. So in other words, you can say if there's anything authentic about the Buddha's teaching, these are definitely the likely candidates. But the final test, of course, is to listen to the suttas, to practice them, and if you can feel the peace inside you, then you know this teaching is helpful. And then from there you find there are other connected teachings. You find lots of references and cross-references you can look at in the footnotes. I've purposely put the footnotes right below on the page, especially for teachers or for students. When you look at the difficult words or terms or sentences, then you can just look below. You can see the meanings are there. It's very convenient. But sometimes there are so much notes, like in the Potaliya Sutta, for example, or the famous Kalama Sutta. There's so much notes that you can't possibly put everything in the footnotes. So that's where you have a very long introduction and a very long set of endnotes. So that's a very special sutta. Of course, we do have a long introduction here. The introduction will tell you kind of the social background, the historical background, literary notes, and things like that will help you understand the sutta better. But there is one more thing very special about the Sutta Discovery series. It's not only a scriptural commentary, it is also a contemporary social commentary. Because we know there are lots of problems with religion today, with Buddhism even today. So the question is, how do we solve these problems? Especially, how do we solve these problems from the Buddha's teachings? So when the occasion is right, I would kind of use the Buddha's teaching and say, okay, here you are, this is what the Buddha would suggest, and this is the problem you're having now, and this is the way to solve it. So this is the modern social commentary. So you have two big aspects of this translation. One is the scriptural commentary, which explains the sutta to you in a traditional way, based on this one, the traditional way meaning the sutta commentaries themselves, letting the sutta speak for itself. Then you have the teachings, the meditation teachings of the contemplative monks, the forest monks. And then you have the teachings of the scholars, the modern scholars who are very good in their language from the philological viewpoint, and of course from our own personal practice. So there are like 4 or 5 angles where we look at this sutta. So that's why it's very interesting to study all these wonderful texts even today. Right, let's begin on page 126, the Discourse to Potaliya, the houselord, M54. Thus have I heard. So this is like a hallmark, a seal to show that this sutta was heard by Ananda, the Buddha's personal attendant. Then he's got this great eidetic memory, photographic memory, he's able to chant very fast. And he has heard almost all the suttas the Buddha has taught, or at least a quite sizable amount, enough to feel like quite many volumes. And the whole Pali Tipitaka is, the Thai version is 45 volumes. The first part, of course, is the Vinaya, the last part is Abhidhamma, but the middle part is the Sutta. So most of these suttas have been memorized by Ananda and handed down to the first council and down to us today. The sutta, the narrator tells us, at one time, the Blessed One was staying in Anguttarapa. This is a very ancient, one of the 16 kingdoms well known in the Buddha's time, or rather 16 states. They call the Mahajanapada. So this is one of them. And there was a market town of the Anguttarapas called Apana. So you have, the villages are called gamas, and then you have the Nigama. Nigama are market towns. They were originally mostly crossroads, and people would go there, sell their things, hawkers, traders, and they set up stalls there, and slowly business began to grow, people began to settle down, and this crossroads town becomes a town, and there's lots of market there, so it's called a market town, and something can be very big. So the reason why Buddha lives near Apana, one reason is because it's convenient to collect alms food in the morning. But the Buddha wouldn't live in such a place, too noisy, too crowded. He would live a little way out in the forest where we wouldn't be able to hear the noise of the city, far from the madding crowd, in other words. Section 2. Then early in the morning, the Blessed One, taking his robe and bowl, entered Apana for alms. Having walked for alms food in Apana and having taken his meal after the alms round, he approached a certain forest grove for the day rest. It can be very warm certain times of the year, even in North India, so this is a time when you have a siesta. Here, of course, when it applies to the monk, normally the monk would sit in meditation under a tree. Of course, very often, because of the heat of the day and the heaviness of the food, people do fall asleep, but they try to meditate. And it's a time when you have lots of stories. Mara would appear to the monks and nuns, frightening them and so on, because they are not very mindful. For this term also applies to lay people, but a slightly different word, and it simply means siesta, and people actually sleep in the daytime, so that's another kind of meaning of the word. So the Buddha was kind of resting in the heat of the day under a tree. Okay, so the scene is set, right? The story begins. Potaliya meets the Buddha, section 3. Now at that time too, the houselord Potaliya was fully dressed and clothed, fully attired with umbrella and sandals, was walking about on a stroll to stretch his legs. So here you see this person who proclaims himself as a holy man, as a renunciant. So, he appears fully dressed, fully clothed. In other words, he's wearing the dhoti and the kurta, everything, the soft, comfortable cotton robes, and he's got his umbrella in case it rains, and he's got his sandals to make sure his feet are protected, and he's walking about for leisure, so to speak, to stretch his legs. Monks also do this kind of walking, but the way the monks will be up and down mindfully, okay? Whereas in the case of Potaliya, is probably walking about wherever he wishes. Having approached and plunged into the forest grove, so he goes to the forest because that's the place which is very cool in the heat of the day. So people love going to the forest, and the forests in northern India are kind of not like our Malaysian Singapore jungle. The forests are kind of that are more space. You can sit under a tree, for example. So right, so Potaliya goes into the forest and he sees the Buddha, and having approached the Buddha in the forest, he goes up, he greets, they exchange friendly greetings, and he stands at one side. Then, so the sutta says, having approached and plunged into the forest grove, he approached the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When the cordial and friendly greetings were concluded, he stood at one side. The Buddha speaks to him first. The Buddha welcomes him and says, "There are seats, houselord. If you wish, please sit down." Okay, this is the kind of opening remark the Buddha made after the greetings. When this was spoken, the houselord Potaliya thought, "The recluse Gautama addresses me with the word houselord," and being angry and displeased, remained silent. Okay, so this is one of the occurrences of silence. I've written a long essay on silence, just silence, white people are silent. So this is one of the occasions, the silence of anger. We have the silence of wisdom, the silence of meditation, and so here's the silence of anger. So now this is interesting. You see the Buddha here being very friendly and cordial, even humble. So he says the first time, "Houselord, there are seats, please sit down." I mean, this is very common in Asian hospitality. We welcome people, say, "Please sit down," then we offer some drinks, even food. But Potaliya is very upset, so he doesn't do anything. And then the second time the Buddha said to the houselord Potaliya, "There are seats, houselord, if you wish, please sit down." Again, he's silent, not happy. And then the third time, the Buddha says the same thing. So this, again, here you have this Indian custom in the Buddha's time where things are done 3 times, and once you reach the 3rd time, you better do something about it. So you cannot remain silent anymore. So this time he has to say something. So he first thinks. So this way, in Buddhist literature, we are able to hear the person think, so to speak. The narrator will tell us what he thinks. So Potaliya thinks, "The recluse Gautama addresses me with the word houselord," and being angry, he refuses to say anything. Then finally, third time he has to say something. He says, "This, Master Gautama, is improper." So you got to imagine he's quite upset, so he's going to be quite strong in his voice. "It is unseemly that you should address me with the word houselord." Okay. Then the Buddha, of course, replies quite calmly, "But you, houselord, have the features, the marks, the signs houselord. So what the Buddha is saying, but you look just like a houselord, so I have to call you a houselord. Then Potaliya says, even then, Master Gautama, all work have been given up by me. All business have been cut off by me. So Potaliya is trying to defend himself. He says, look, I've given up all my wealth, so you cannot call me houselord. Then the Buddha replies, but how, houselord, have all work been given up by you, all business being cut off by you? Now what a lot of translators, those who are not familiar with suttas, do not notice, there is a subtle nuance here. The Buddha is playing on the word all, and this word all, sabba or sarva in Sanskrit, has a very deep significance in Buddhist teaching, Buddhist psychology. And we'll get to know the significance of this in a moment. This is the beginning. It's not that long, this sentence. Later on you have the full sentence being used where all is used in its various forms. So basically the Buddha is saying, you have not really given up everything. I mean, if you have, you must be giving up really everything, the all, then only you are a renunciant. So this piqued the interest of Potaliya. He's saying, wow, what do you mean? So in a sense, Potaliya is a good man. He is kind of curious. You might say he's a little romantic guy who have this romantic idea about renunciation, and he tries to do his part being a renunciant. And finally he meets the Buddha, who's the true renunciant, and the Buddha said, that's not the way. So he asked the Buddha, what's the way then? How do you do it? How do you totally renounce the world? Right, so 3.7. Here, Master Gautama, that which is my wealth or grain or gold or silver, they all have been handed over to my children as their inheritance. In other words, I have handed over all my wealth to my children. I have no more assets, so to speak. Neither advising nor criticizing them in these matters. I live with only food and clothing, or covering, if you like. Now, this is too early in Indian social history or religious history for what are called the four ashrams, the four stages of life. These four stages of life actually was introduced as a kind of response to the success of Buddhist monasticism. So the Brahmins introduced the four ashram system to prevent their following from turning to monkhood. In other words, their social duties. When they're young, they must be brahmacharis. Brahmacharis means basically bachelor, a student. And this is related to the Bachelor of Arts and so on. So that's why they're called bachelors, because our university, as you know, started in the West, and it was kind of began in the monasteries, where the students are bachelors, and you cannot have any affairs like today. And then you go on, after you have finished as a student, you go on to become a family man. That's our duty. You got to get married, So this is the customary non-Buddhist ashram. And then after that, after you have finished your duty as a family man, probably you are like 50 years old, 40, 50, and then you become a kind of a holy man. Okay? And finally, when you're very old, you leave the home, and your nursing home will be the forest. You live alone in the forest, of course people will come offer you food there. So these are the four stages of life to prevent Brahmins from becoming Buddhist monks. So here, there seems to be a hint of this, that it's almost like Potaliya feels that it's time for him to renounce the world and to leave everything to his children. But he's not exactly doing it right. He's still wearing nice clothes and all the regalia of a rich man, and the only thing he doesn't have is a walking stick, actually, because normally there's another case of another rich man, he walks around, he's called Dandapani, I think, so he holds a stick. And here, of course, Potaliya uses his umbrella probably as a walking stick. So he tells the Buddha, this is how, Master Gautama, all work have been given up by me, all business have been given up by me. Okay, perhaps you should pronounce the word as busyness here, because he's saying it has nothing to do with the running of his family anymore. So in that sense, he's a renunciant. Then the Buddha, in a sense, gently protests. 3.8. The Buddha says, but houselord, what you call the cutting off of business is different from what is called the cutting off of business in the noble one's discipline, then Potaliya becomes really curious. So now he addresses, notice how he changes the way he addresses the Buddha. He says, how now Bhante. Okay, so you got to highlight the word Bhante, because we will see he addresses the Buddha by name. He says, Master Gautama. That's the way usually Brahmins would address the Buddha. Say, Master, Bo Gautama. Okay. Bo is a very common word which the Brahmins use to address each other. It's just like locally we use the word Tuan. So that's Bo. But Bhante also has the same meaning, but it's more respectful, if you like. How now, Bhante, is the cutting off of business in a noble one's discipline like? So notice here, the audience is ready, questions, then the Buddha responds. Okay, now let us go back a little bit. Potaliya actually asked the Buddha two questions. The first one is found in section 3.8, and he asked the Buddha, how now, Bhante, is the cutting off of business in the noble one's discipline like? Right? So, and then the Buddha goes on to talk about that, 8 conditions. Then the Buddha finishes that part. Okay? Well, actually, he goes on to talk about the 8 conditions which constitute moral conduct training, Sila Sikha. Then, at the end of that section on moral training, he asks a second question, that is section 14.3. But how, Bhante, is there all the cutting off of all business in the all in every way? Okay, that's actually is the bigger question. So this is the second one. So this is what we're going to cover now. These 2 very important questions asked by this Potaliya. So let's look at the first question in section 3.8. How now, Bhante, is the cutting off of business in the noble one's discipline like? Then, in other words, now he requests the Buddha quite humbly. He's very interested, he wants to know, and he's ready to hear the Dharma. So he says, it would be good, Bhante. Notice here he calls the Buddha Bhante. He doesn't call the Buddha Master Gautama like the other Brahmins would. So it would be good, Bhante, if the Blessed One were to show the Dharma, that is the cutting off of business in the noble one's discipline. In other words, how do you begin to renounce the world in the true sense of the word? Then Buddha replies, in that case, houselord, listen well, I will speak. And Potaliya responds, yes, Bhante, so they're ready, he's ready. Then the Buddha says, the Blessed One, or rather the narrator says, the Blessed One said this. That means the teaching, the main teaching is coming. So first we have what's called the syllabus, kind of a summary of the teachings that the Buddha is going to talk about. He gives first the short teaching in brief, Sankita, and then later he will give the long teaching. Sometimes the Buddha will remain silent, right? And some requests. So here again, the Buddha stops for a while, and then Potaliya will request for the detailed teaching. So the Buddha begins with a short teaching first. There are, houselord, these 8 conditions that conduce to the cutting off of business or busyness, if you like, in the noble one's discipline. What are the 8? Dependent on not killing, the taking of life should be abandoned. Dependent on taking only the given, stealing should be abandoned. Dependent on truth-telling, false speech should be abandoned. Dependent on not slandering, slandering should be abandoned. Dependent on lack of lustful desire should be abandoned. Dependent on lack of angry blaming should be abandoned. Dependent on the lack of angry despair should be abandoned. Dependent on non-arrogance should be abandoned. So these are the 8 conditions. what's interesting about this 8 conditions is kind of unique to this sutta. In fact, there are lots of unique teachings in this sutta, which shows that this sutta is quite early. One reason is because the lack of technical terms and the teachings are almost like ad-lib, especially given to Potaliya. But it also applies to us if you read carefully what the teaching is about. So here you have 2 aspects, what we today might call the Sila aspect and the Dharma aspect. The morality of permission and what is called the morality of commission, doing, or Sila and Dharma, or truth and value. So in the first part, dependent on the positive quality, okay? So actually here it is the positive quality that begins first, the Dharma aspect. Notice that, say, you take number 1, it says dependent on not killing, right? So in other words, having stopped killing, then you practice non-killing. That's one way of putting it. Now both appear to be the morality of omission actually, but we can take, I think we should take the second one as the morality of commission. In other words, you stop killing, but what simplicity here is that how do you do that? And later in other suttas, for example in the Uposatha Sutta, the Tadahupposatha Sutta, the Buddha says, having given up killing, you should practice or show loving kindness. Right? So we can kind of include that in the second part of the sentence in each case. You know, the 8 conditions here, the 8 pairs of conditions here. And then then the Buddha kind of probably stops for a while. It's not mentioned here, but you can know from the next sentence that Potaliya speaks. Probably just remain silent for a while, maybe to see if Potaliya can follow. Then Potaliya says, Bhante, as regards these teachings on the 8 conditions, that conduce to the cutting off of business or busyness in a noble discipline that have been given by the Blessed One in brief, without elaboration. It would be good if for me, but if the Blessed One were out of compassion to explain them in detail. So here again we see only when the audience, the listener requests, then the Buddha will go on teaching. Yeah? There is a famous case, the teaching given to an elderly person, Nakulapita, where the Buddha just gave one short sentence. The Buddha tells Nakulapita to reflect in this way: although my body may be sick, my mind will not be sick. And Nakulapita is very happy, elated, so happy. His whole being kind of became radiant. He didn't ask any more things, and the Buddha just went away to rest. And then Sariputta comes along and asks Nakulapita, say, oh, you look so radiant, you must have learned some Dharma. Nakulapita said, yes. And what did you learn? Sariputta asked. Say, oh, the Buddha taught me this great line: although my body is sick, my mind will not be sick. Then Sariputta asked, did you ask the Buddha what this line means? In other words, do you ask the Buddha for an elaboration? But he says, oh, I didn't. He was so happy, he thought he understood. And it's very often, we think we understand. So anyway, Sariputta comes along and helps Nakulapita and kind of gives the teaching in detail. Right? So here the Buddha does it himself. So Potaliya requests the Buddha to give this teaching in detail, and Buddha does so. And again, the Buddha does something unique again. The Buddha says this sentence twice. He says, in that case, houselord, listen, pay close attention, I will speak. Normally you just hear this once, but in this case you have twice, because the teaching is given twice if you like. So in the first part, you find just after in section 3.9, right? Also you have the same sentence. So here again, getting the audience ready. then the Buddha starts with the first precepts, if you like, or first pair of precepts. Section 6, non-killing. Okay, this is the key template that we must know, because there's going to be 8 sections. Okay, they're all kind of repetitive, and the key words or key sentences, key phrases only change. So we got to make sure you understand this first part. That is why I put the 6 and then there's a bracket 1 there, brackets 1. The bracket means the first, bracket 1 is the first of the pair of precepts. So we'll focus on this, and then the rest will kind of, the other 7 sets will kind of fit in just nice. Dependent on not taking life, the taking of life should be abandoned. So it is said, in what connection is this said? So the thesis is stated first. Here, houselord, a noble disciple reflects thus. Alright, reflects thus. So we are meant to prepare ourselves mentally how to practice the precepts. So there are 1, 2, 3, there are 4, 5, 6 aspects of this reflection. First one, I'm practicing for the sake of abandoning and uprooting those fetters because of which I might kill living beings. The purpose of practicing the precepts. I'm keeping the precepts in the first case so that I will not kill living beings. Okay, so that's the reason I'm keeping the precepts. Then the question is, now the next question is why? Why should I do that? For if I were to kill living beings, I would surely blame myself for doing so. Right? So in other words, here the Buddha is recognizing Potaliya and all of us. We have a certain inherent goodness in us, this ability and willingness to do good. Right? Now we must not concretize this special quality. It is there, but it can kind of be hidden away. It must be activated, so to speak. We don't call this a Buddha seed, because it's not the kind of idea in early Buddhism. It's a kind of the possibility of goodness, and the Buddha declares that it is because goodness is possible that I'm teaching you Dharma. In fact, people can change, in other words. And here again, you have the teaching of impermanence coming in. Well, and that's good enough. We don't have to turn it into a dogma or a doctrine where there is this idea of a Buddha seed, something fixed, that we all can become Buddha. That sounds like predestination. So we have to be careful not to philosophize too much when we talk Dharma. So here, then the next point, on account of killing, the wise, upon investigating, would blame me too. So I will blame myself because there's goodness in me, so I'm going to say, oh, this is wrong, I shouldn't have done it, right? And then if I don't do that, then society, the good people in society, will blame me. So here, in other words, we're not living alone. The precepts are about living in a community. So whenever we break the precepts, we affect other people. And there are good people out there. We may or may not know them, but they are good, wise, kind people, and they're going to blame us and say, no, you should have done this, you're wrong. Now the reason why we need this kind of interaction is so that society is possible, and not just any society, but a good society, a wholesome society is possible, not its opposite, a pathological society. Now the fourth aspect, on account of killing, with the bodies breaking up after death, a suffering state would be expected. Okay, let's say if I don't blame myself and I think I'm justified in killing, and society doesn't blame me, the wise don't blame me, but still, karma will take effect. Because of constant killing, there's a lot of fear and stress and negative thoughts, and it's going to affect us even in this life itself. But this negative energy is going to flow into the next life also. So that's karma. And this next life is called a suffering state because of the present negative conditions, cause effects, so to speak, or causes effects. Indeed, this very killing is a fetter, a mental hindrance. So here's a kind of summary telling us why killing is negative. It is number one, a fetter. A fetter is like a ball and chain, holds a prisoner back so that he won't be able to run or not run fast, or easily caught if he tries to run. So these fetters hold us back in samsara, in suffering and ignorance. So killing is that fetter. Because if you kill, you're going to... no one really enjoys killing, because if you do it, you have another big problem. It's going to come back and you're going to feel bad about it, and you won't be able to meditate, and you feel guilty, right? So that's one kind of fetter, okay? And it's a mental hindrance. Once you start meditating, you're just beginning to be happy, and then this negative thought comes, oh, I killed somebody, and then happiness is gone. So it becomes a hindrance, right? So here, what is interesting here, you see these two terms, a fetter, a mental hindrance, almost synonymous, or they overlap in parts, that they are near synonyms. So here again, you have a hint that these are not technical terms, because later on you find the fetters, there are 10 of them, and these fetters are what hold us back in this world, and if you break all the fetters, you become an arhat. Okay? If you break the first 3 fetters, you become a string winner. So they become technical terms. And whereas the mental hindrance, there are 5 of them, right? And mental hindrance deal, or rather prevent us from getting good meditation, getting jhana. So in due course, they became separate technical terms. So once you see the 2 words juxtaposed like that, suggesting they are synonymous or near synonymous, that means they are non-technical terms, and that suggests this is an early sutta. Early suttas tend to be simple, tend to be ad hoc, tend to lack technical terms. Alright, then there's one more point in the same reflection. And dependent on killing, influxes, vexation and fever would arise. Right, there you are. Influxes meaning whatever goes through our senses, our sense experiences, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. This repercussion from having killed will somehow affect how we sense things. And we'll be vexed, we'll be troubled. And there's a fever. Here means a kind of uneasiness, a deep angst, if you like. But then there is a positive side. But for one who abstains from killing, there will be no influxes, vexation, or fever. So it is in this connection that it is said, dependent on not taking life, that taking of life should be abandoned. Alright, so there you are. That's a template you must know. You have like 6 ideas there, each of them, and each of them are applied to the other 7 teachings, 7 practices. Okay, there are 8 practices here. Alright. Yes. Okay, so now section 7, which is the second precept, non-stealing, dependent on taking only the given. There you are. So this is a practice. Right? This is actually a practice, taking only the given. So dependent here actually means you live on that understanding. Your life is based on that kind of practice, taking only the given. So in this case, we know very well this is the practice aspect. Yeah? And then the second one is the morality of omission. Okay, so to correct myself here a bit, yeah. So, dependent on taking only the given, the stealing should be abandoned. So it is said. In what connection is this said? And then you have the 6 conditions. Firstly, I'm kind of paraphrasing now. If I'm practicing this precept or this training to give up taking the not given. First thing, okay, so you know what you're going to do. Because what? What's the rationale? Because if I were to steal, I would blame myself. If I don't blame myself, others who are wise, who are good, society would blame me. Or worse, I could be taken to court, I could get into serious trouble. You could expand on many other aspects. Number 3, if I don't see that it is wrong, this act of stealing, and no one blames him, still karma will take effect in the future. when I'll be facing the fruits of this in the future, not just in next life, even in this life itself, but definitely in some future time. So this is a fetter, this is a mental hindrance. So in this way, dependent on steering, influxes, vexation, fever would arise. So I'll be troubled by this. But if I don't do this, then I won't face this kind of consequences. All right, I have repeated the same structure, the reflection. Then next precept, section 8, precept number 3, truth-telling. Dependent on truth-telling, false speech should be abandoned. Okay, here again, here it's only a talk, so I'm not going to go through all the steps. You have to reflect on all the other 6 aspects of truth-telling, of avoiding lying. And then the next one, section 9, is the 4th precept, non-slandering. Dependent on non-slandering, slandering should be abandoned. Then section 10 deals with no lustful desire. Dependent on the lack of lustful desire, lustful desire should be abandoned. Right? So you have a kind of double negative here, but in the case of the first sentence, there's a hint of the morality of commission. You do it, right? You make an effort not to have lustful desire. So it's sort of effort of non-effort, if you like. Then comes the 6 steps of reflection. Then next is the 6th precept, no angry blaming. Dependent on the lack of angry blaming should be abandoned. Then the 7th precept, no angry despair. Dependent on the lack of angry despair should be abandoned. So the meaning is that the more you practice the positive aspects of the precept, the weaker the negative aspects become. You let go more and more of the habitual tendency of breaking the precept. Precept 8, non-arrogance. Dependent on non-arrogance, arrogance should be abandoned. So here again, we ask ourselves, why do I want to practice this? So that I would not be arrogant. Arrogant means what? Measuring other people, looking down on people, looking at myself, measuring myself against others, thinking that I'm better than others, or I'm as good as others, or I'm inferior to others. So these are the 3 kinds of complexes in early Buddhism. So we do not want to measure people. We take everyone, every moment as a new person, if you like. And that way we can openly, truly communicate with others. Then we go on to reflect, why do I do this? Because if I were to be arrogant, then I would blame myself. I would feel bad about it. And then if I don't blame myself, those who are good, those who are wise would blame me. Society would blame me. Even if I do not blame myself or society do not blame me, then the karma will take effect. It will come back to me somehow, like chickens coming home to roost. If not this life, then future lives. And therefore, arrogance is a fetter. It is a mental hindrance. It prevents me from getting out of my suffering state, and it prevents me from having good meditation. So dependent on arrogance, influxes, vexation, fever would arise. All my sense experiences somehow will be affected by this negative act. Breaking the precept, I will feel troubled by it, and there is this sense of angst and uneasiness pervading my life, and that's not what I want. So the Buddha concludes this part and say, okay, these are the 8 conditions. But then the Buddha says something interesting. Section 14.2, but, he tells Potaliya, in a noble one's discipline, here noble one refers to, later you find out, especially at the end of the sutta, it refers to an arhat. The noble one's training. In other words, if you are training to reach the highest, to be an arhat. This is not at all the cutting of all business in the all in every way. The sentence is a bit longer now. Notice that the first sentence was slightly shorter, so because this first part, which we have just finished, refers to moral training. This is the first of the 3 trainings. First training in moral conduct, second training mental cultivation, third training wisdom. So what the Buddha is saying here, this is just the first part. He didn't directly say this, but it's implied it's only the first part, so it's not complete. And of course then Potaliya asked the second big question, 14.3. But how, Bhante, is there all the cutting off of all business in the all in every way? Right? Again, now this is a deep question. The fact that Potaliya asked this question, maybe either that he understood the meaning of all, at least in theory, or he's very curious, he wants to know. Now we need to know, why is the Buddha playing on the words, the word all here? This is of course the beauty of the awakened mind. They use words like music, right? So there's a rhyme here, alliteration, all, okay? But the problem is in English you can't get some kind of alliterative sound in the last word, every way. Because every way also in Pali would you use the same word, sabba. Okay? So the word sabba is used in different forms. It's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adverb, and so on. So all that are in the notes, you can read up in the notes in front of this translation. The key idea you must understand here is the all, the last all mentioned here before every way, sabba. And you might like to read the Sabba Sutta, where it's about the word all, where the sutta says that all refers to our eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, the 6 internal senses, and then the 6 external sense objects, and then the 6 sense consciousnesses, or the 18 elements. These are the all. These form our world. Beyond this, the Buddha says, you will be troubled if you say there are something more than this. That's all there is. These are the things that constitute our world. So you have to understand that teaching to understand this question. How do we conquer the self, if you like? How do we renounce in such a way that I'll be a master of myself, I'll be a master of all my senses, I'll be awakened, I'll be free from suffering. Right? So it's a question that covers a lot of things. You might even say it is a question that points to the ultimate answer, if you like. So again the Buddha says, in that case, houselord, listen, pay careful attention, I will speak. This is the 3rd time the Buddha says this, isn't it?
Yes.
Alright, so there you are. It makes it even more interesting. You find Buddha says this sentence 3 times. Then, of course, Potaliya says, yes, Bhante, and then the Buddha goes on to talk about the training in mental cultivation. And here the Buddha uses 7 parables. But here the Buddha only deals with one aspect, one of the fetters or mental hindrance event, that is sensual desire. But this is the key one. If this is overcome, then all the rest kind of just fall away like dominoes in time. The Blessed One said this. The parable of the bone. Section 15, the Buddha says, suppose houselord, a dog overcome by hunger and weakness, were to wait by a cow slaughterer's shambles, it's where the abattoir, no? Then a skilled cow slaughterer or his apprentice were to toss to the dog a bare bone, well cut, scraped bereft of meat and blood smeared. What do you think, houselord? Would that dog, gnawing at the bare bone that is well cut and scraped bereft of meat, blood smeared, be rid of his hunger and weakness? Potaliya says, not at all, Bhante. Why is that? Right? Because the bone is just a bone. Okay? So, the Buddha says, even so, right now the Buddha compares it to something higher. It's going to raise our attention to the Dharma level. Even so, sensual pleasures have been spoken of by the Blessed One as being comparable to a bare bone. There are great suffering or great despair, and there's more peril here. So in other words here, sensual pleasure is such that you can never be fully satisfied with it. That's the nature of sensual pleasure. You want more and more of it, you do not know when to stop. Of course, here, as you know, as lay people, we can enjoy sensual pleasures within the spirit of the 5 precepts. So as long as you keep to the 5 precepts, in other words, you must know when to stop. Okay, so we do have a group of practitioners who are called Kama Bhogini, those who enjoy sensual pleasures. Here, do not misconstrue this teaching. It doesn't mean we can do what we like. What's meant here is there are lay people who get married, so you be connected with your wife and family. You keep the 5 precepts. Basically, you know when to stop. You enjoy nice food, yes, but while you're eating it, you enjoy, like a meditator, enjoying the food. When it's finished, so good, you're happy, and you don't miss it or desire it or get really angry because you can't get it. This applies to all the precepts, right? Another interesting thing is here the parable talks about a cow slaughterer. In other words, in the Buddha's time, they do kill cows and they do eat beef. Right? So, in other words, the idea that a cow is sacred is not yet known in the Buddha's time. So, this is a very interesting point in Indian social history. It shows that the idea that the cow is sacred came much later, after the Buddha's time, maybe even in the centuries CE, the Common Era, not BCE, in other words, later on. Okay, so this is the first parable, parable of the bone. Then the Buddha goes on to the second parable, the parable of the piece of meat. Suppose, houselord, a vulture or a heron or a hawk, having seized a piece of meat, were to fly off, and then other vultures or herons or hawks, relentlessly pursuing it, were to peck and tug at it. What do you think, houselord? Is that vulture or heron or hawk were not to at once let go of that piece of meat, wouldn't it meet with death or deadly pains on that account? Right? Here you have this very dramatic mid-air situation. This bird has got a piece of meat and other birds are chasing after it. So if it doesn't let go of the meat, it's going to meet danger or even death. So, again, the Buddha says, sensual pleasures like that. You're not just enjoying it, but you are inviting problems, because when other people know about it, you might get into trouble, or people might get upset or jealous with you, right? So it's not just having sensual pleasures, you must know the consequences. You find this teaching also developed in the Sigalovada Sutta, for example, the dangers of breaking the precepts. The third parable, the parable of the grass torch. Suppose, houselord, a man were to hold a blazing grass torch. What do you think, houselord? If that man were not at once to let go of that blazing grass torch, wouldn't it burn his hand or his arm or some parts of his body, so that he would meet with death or deadly pain on that account? Right? Especially if the wind is blowing towards you, right? So you have to extinguish that grass torch. So sensual pleasures are also like that. We will hurt ourselves if we're not careful. Maybe our health will be affected, our social standing will be affected, our family will be affected, we will be economically affected, and so on. Okay? Not to talk about karma. Remember the 6 conditions earlier mentioned? Now the fourth parable, the parable of the blazing charcoal pit. It gets more dramatic now. Suppose, houselord, there were a charcoal pit deeper than a man's height, full of blazing charcoal with neither flame nor smoke. That was just white hot, very hot. Then comes along a man who loves life and loves not death, who loves comfort and hates pain. 2 strong men would then, seizing him by both arms, drag him to that blazing charcoal pit. What do you think, houselord? Wouldn't that man twist his body about here and there? Of course he would, right? Why is that so? Because, Bhante, that man knows that if he were to fall into that blazing charcoal pit, he would meet with death or deadly pain on that account. So here, sensual pleasures compared to this big bed of blazing charcoal. If you were to fall into it, you really hurt yourself. So here, in other words, the dangers of sensual pleasures again is going to hurt us. Now, the fifth parable is the parable of the dream. Suppose, houselord, a man were to dream of lovely paths, lovely forests, lovely spots, lovely lotus legs, but upon waking he would see none of this. So this is a bit psychological parable. So here the Buddha says, sensual pleasures are also like that. It's like a dream, they're not so real. You think they're great, you wait for them, and then it comes to you and you enjoy it, and you say, is that all? You find there's something missing. That's why you keep on wanting more and more of it. So here the two things. One is to avoid it, or to enjoy it if it is right, to say with someone you love, your spouse. In other words, you do it within the 5 precepts, you use your mindfulness, and you live a happy life as a layperson. Otherwise, you can take the path of renunciation as a layperson or as a monk in terms of meditation. Meditation is the path of renunciation. We renounce the attachment to the body, at least temporarily, and we deal directly with the mind. And joy arises, so you have a higher enjoyment or sense of joy. You find you don't need the more physical or grosser form of pleasure. Okay? So, sensual pleasures are like a dream. Number 6, the parable of the borrowed goods. Suppose, houselord, a man had borrowed some goods, such as a fashionable vehicle or a fine jewel earrings, and that man with such borrowed goods before him, surrounding him, would go about in the middle of the shopping area. People seeing him would say thus, "What a wealthy man indeed! This is how it is said, the wealthy enjoy their wealth." Now when the owners were to see that man, wouldn't they take back their things right then? Yes, Bhante, they would, said Potaliya. What is the reason for this? That's because they own those things, so they will take it back. So this man is left himself embarrassed, ashamed. So here, sensual pleasure is not ours, in other words. In other words, you can lose the source of your pleasure. Right? We often look to others as objects of pleasure. If you do that, then you will lose them in due course because of the way you see people as objects. In fact, you might say, if you reflect on the nature of sexuality, sex is the most selfish of human acts, in that sense. That means if we are to be truly good lay people who are married, who are committed to a partner, then sexuality should be an act of commitment to each other, of awareness to each other, of total sharing with each other. So there is, in a sense, a lay teaching where sexuality need not be a selfish act. It's difficult, but we can work on it. These are teachings monks won't tell you, they're not supposed to tell you anyway, but it's the advantage of being a lay teacher, where the teacher can advise you how to live a happy lay life, in other words. Because in the end, this kind of sexuality of experience will tell you, oh, I'm very happy with this. And as you age, as you grow old, you find, yes, you live a good life, and you don't need anymore. It's a passing phase in life, and you live more happily with happy memories. Then number 7, the parable of the fruit-laden trees. Okay, let me summarize this and paraphrase this. So here there's this tree in the forest, lots of fruits, nice juicy fruits, but the fruits, none of them fell on the ground. That's what you would call a windfall. They fall on the ground and they're good, you can eat them, like durian. You know? So here the fruits are there, and here comes along a man who's looking for fruits, and he sees this tree and says, wow, look at the fruits, this is just what I'm looking for. So he's unable to, he doesn't have any pole with him, so he's very good in climbing a tree. So he climbs up and he sits there eating the fruits, and he puts all these fruits into his clothing to bring down, but he's there enjoying himself. Here comes along a second man who has the same purpose and aim. He's looking for fruits in the forest, and he comes to this same tree, The parable doesn't say whether he knows there's a man there or not. There's probably a big tree, and the first man couldn't be seen. So the second man says, "Wow, look at this tree! It's got so much fruits, and there's no windfall. There's no fruits on the ground. So let's chop this tree down at the root, and then we take whatever we want." It's not a very good thing to do. You kill the tree. It's this kind of story that later on developed into the fairy tale of the golden goose. You kill the tree dies, and that's all you get. So the tree falls, and the man in the tree also gets hurt. So the man in the tree getting hurt is like sexual pleasure, because later if you indulge in sexual pleasure, you will get hurt if you do not know how to let go. So these are the 7 parables, but there's something underlying all the 7 parables. That is, so what do we do? So I've hinted to you a bit there about meditation, going deeper and higher into meditation. The jhanas bring us great joy. So because of that great joy, which is of a higher quality, we can let go of a lower quality. That's why good monks who are good meditators do not need sex and sensual pleasures. They don't watch TV, for example. So they don't go on tours to like a holiday. They don't need holidays, because every day to the good monk or nun is a holy day. That's how the word holiday started. So here you see section 21.5. This is the ending part, a refrain that goes through all the other 6 parables.
7 parables.
7 parables. Oh no, this is the 7th parable. It goes through all the other 6 parables. Having seen this, according to true reality, with right wisdom, he rejects the equanimity that is diversified based on diversity. Right? So this is what's called a worldly kind of equanimity, right? Gaha Sitta Nekama. Okay. In other words, it's a worldly kind of letting go. It's what we call Gaha Sitta Upeka. It's very similar to what we colloquially say bochap. Bochap means you don't care. But it's a worldly kind of nonchalance, non-caring. In other words, all you care for is what you want. You're seeking pleasure. You don't care about other things. And after you have got what you want, you feel, oh yeah, that's life. I feel happy. I feel good. And I don't care about other things. Is that really so? Because you will need it again. So this is the worldly kind of equanimity. Is based on diversity, because you keep looking, you want variety, you want change, right? So one wife is not enough, you want to have many wives. One woman is not enough, many women. Or one man is not enough, many men, and so on. So you diversify, and that's because you're not really satisfied. You keep on looking, keep on wanting. So this is based on diversity. Then the positive part, he cultivates the equanimity that is unified or become one, meaning mentally become one, samadhi, based on oneness, where clinging to material things of the world utterly ceases without any remains. Right? So this is, in other words, a total focus of the mind, jhana. If you're truly happy, you come out with it, you reflect on the impermanence of all this state, and you attain certain levels of awakening, stream winning onwards, even up to arahathood, then you're really able to renounce the world. So this is the true renunciation, not just becoming a monk or a nun or wearing a uniform, new hairstyle. Even a monk has to renounce again in the true sense of the word. Sometimes becoming a monk could hinder this spiritual development even greater if this monk is not careful. In other words, still practicing the monastic precepts, the monk becomes a career monk, or he deals with money or power and pleasure and so on, then he might as well be a layman. So the Buddha again and again warns the monastics, you have to practice whatever you have kind of declared yourself to do. So it is an avowed kind of life. a life of moral virtue, mental training, and wisdom and liberation. So this training on the mind ends here. So then comes the third part, the closing part, wisdom training. Section 22. You have the three knowledges here, but it's quite clear, quite direct. First knowledge is the recollection of past lives. Now, houselord, that noble disciple who has arrived at this very same supreme mindfulness, whose purity is due to equanimity, recollects manifold past existence. Right? So here, you know the Buddha is implying, or is kind of directing the teaching here towards jhana. It's not directly mentioned, but we know from the rising of these three knowledges. So this person attains such a level of equanimity, meaning jhana here, is able to recall past lives. Why is this useful? He begins to understand what was I in the past. Okay, I was this, I went through this kind of stage, so I was suffering in this way because of this, right? So you know for yourself what happened to you. Then the second knowledge, second true knowledge, if you like, section 23. This is the knowledge of what's called the divine eye or clairvoyance. This refers to the true understanding, true knowledge of how others fare through suffering states, through happy states on account of their karma. So the first is the truth of rebirth, the second knowledge, the truth of karma. Right? So you're able to see how others suffer or prosper according to the karma, and you're able to, in a sense, help them, explain to them what's going on in their lives. But these two knowledges alone does not constitute awakening. The third one is what defines the arhat, and that is called the knowledge of the destruction of the influxes which arise from the totally calm mind of jhana, reflecting on the impermanence and so on. So here, destruction of influxes means the arhat is in full control of all his senses and is able to, if you like, filter away all the defilements, and he normally reacts to all these sense experiences. He sees them all as impermanent, suffering, non-self. He has destroyed karma. He doesn't create any new karma. In other words, there's no more lightning rod standing out in the open so that in the life storm this lightning can strike anytime. He's safe in that sense. Or another way of putting it is, you can say, well, he has his lightning rod, so whenever lightning strikes, just go straight into the safe Dharma ground. It's not affected by it. You can use this imagery in different ways. So, finally the Buddha says, section 25, to that extent, houselord, there is all the cutting, all business, in every way. Right? So there you are. So that the person, this practitioner, has become an arhat, awakened, just like the Buddha. Okay? So the arhat has nothing more to do. He's like Buddha. Okay? He has attained Buddhahood. Not Samasa Buddha, but Buddhahood. Okay? Now here again we have to be careful, because later teachings, not knowing the spirit of the sutta or some other polemical reasons, polemical also means political in this case, they say, oh, the arhat state is not enough, they have to become Buddhas again. I do not know where the basic teachings are. It's definitely it's a serious wrong view. So this is something we should not subscribe to. Okay, so the state of an arhat is the end, the goal, just like becoming Buddha. Because a Buddha is not a person. A Buddha is is someone liberated. It's just like a graduate from the university, he has passed. A professor also has passed on the same university. But he chose to be a professor. Right? You can have one professor. So here, if you say everyone must become, all the arhats must become Buddhas, again, it's like saying, oh, every graduate must become professors. It doesn't make good sense. You don't have to be a professor. You just need one professor only in a department. okay, in a particular field, if you like. So the Buddha asked the ultimate question to Potaliya. So now what do you think? We got to go back to the first time Potaliya meets the Buddha. Right? He claims that he's a renunciant, right? But he's all well dressed. Right? So the Buddha says, okay, now that you have heard this explanation on true renunciation, what do you think? What do you think about yourself? This is the time you see a transformation, you see Dharma changing people. Dharma is not about giving talks, Dharma is not about how many suttas you have studied and listened. That helps if there's a change in your life. You find your life more meaningful, more peaceful, you are kinder to people, you are happier. That's very important. So this is where Potaliya makes a confession. But his confession is so beautiful, so wonderful, I've called it his lion roar, his declaration of faith, as we will see in a moment. So Potaliya replies, 25.3, who am I, Bhante, to have all the cutting off of all business in the all in every way of the Noble One? Far indeed am I, Bhante, from all the cutting off all business in the all in every way of the Noble One. And why is that? So here it says, for Bhante, in the past, though the wanderers of other sects were not thoroughbreds at all, we thought them to be so. Though they were not thoroughbreds at all, we fed them with the food for thoroughbreds. Though they were not thoroughbreds at all, we placed them in the position of thoroughbreds. In other words, in the past we thought, oh, these wanderers and the followers of other teachings, they were the true teachers, and we treated them in that way. We had this wrong view. But as for the monks, they were truly thoroughbred, but we imagined them not to be so. They were truly thoroughbreds, but we fed them with the food for non-thoroughbreds. They were truly thoroughbreds, but we placed them in positions of non-thoroughbreds. So in the past, I made the mistake of not really recognizing the true quality of the good monks and treated them poorly. So this is in the past. But now, right, 25.6, but now, Bhante, the wanderers of other sects are not thoroughbreds at all. We know them to be so. They are not thoroughbreds at all. We feed them with the food for non-thoroughbreds. Though they are not thoroughbreds at all, we place them in positions. They are non-thoroughbreds at all, so we place them in positions of non-thoroughbreds. In other words, we treat them as they deserve. As for the monks, Bhante, they are truly thoroughbreds, and we will know them as thoroughbreds. They are truly thoroughbreds, and we will feed them with the food of thoroughbreds. They are truly thoroughbreds, and we will place them in the position of thoroughbreds. Right? We will truly respect the monastics. Indeed, Bhante, you have inspired me in a recluse's love for recluses, a recluse's faith in a recluse's respect for a recluse. Right? So this is his declaration of faith. He says, I really understand who are the true holy men, in other words. I respect them, I have love for them, I feel really good about them. Then he declares the famous passage for taking refuge. Excellent Bhante, excellent Bhante. Just as if, Bhante, one were to place upright what had been overturned, or were to reveal what was hidden, or were to show the way to one who was lost, or were to hold up a lamp in the dark so that those with eyes could see forms. In the same way, in numerous ways, the Dharma has been declared by the Blessed One. May I, Bhante, go to the Blessed One for refuge, to the Dharma, and to the community of monks. May the Blessed One remember me as a layman who has gone to him for refuge from this day forth for life. And the sutta ends there.
Can I ask a question? What's the meaning of thoroughbreds?
Thoroughbreds it's a special kind of horse, pedigree horses. They're raised from very good horses. Okay, The parents of the horses are very good horses, so they are strong, fast, healthy, and they are used for in the Buddha's time for the king, for the army. Here, in the case on the social level, in terms of the monks, they also called thoroughbreds. So lots of animal imagery used in the positive sense. In other words, the monks are well trained, disciplined, noble looking. Sometimes the elephant is used, a noble elephant, okay, naga. Okay. So they also play on the word. Naga also means one who does not go by evil. Okay. So thoroughbred refers to the nobility, in the true sense of the word, of the true monastic. Okay. Okay, let's finish. End here.